Morning to everyone. It is a very special Saturday morning for all of us, and it is my extreme honor, if I can say, to welcome so many former chief secretaries and, of course, the present chief secretary on the dais, and so many of the officers whom I had the pleasure of seeing on their seats when I was a probationer. So it's very, very special. In fact, on the dais itself, I have all my former bosses sitting, so it becomes even more special. And this is a session today that the IAS Literary Society of Rajasthan is doing in collaboration with the All India Pensioners Association and the HCM RIPA. Extremely grateful to both the organizations for giving us this a very beautiful opportunity to conduct this session. Allow me to welcome our present Chief Secretary, Madam Srimati Usha Sharma ji. I think we can give them a round of applause, no? Just. I'm deeply grateful to you, ma'am, for sparing your time today and being a chief guest. Thank you so much, ma'am. I also have a very, very special honor to welcome Shri Inderjit Khanna sir, whose book we are going to launch today in Jaipur and have a conversation and listen to him. Sir was the chief secretary when I joined as a probationer and was doing my training here in OTS. And I met him in a very, very special manner because he used to come for swimming every day in the OTS swimming. And Bhavani, my batchmate, is also here today. And I'm sure you'll recall that all three probationers from the 1999 batch lined up early in the morning to catch Sir when he came out from his swimming session in the morning. So thank you very much, sir. It's really life coming full circle to have this opportunity to once again be able to welcome you today as you write your memoirs and speak to us about your life and times in the service. Also very special, our guest today who's going to introduce our author and speaker is Shri Arun Kumarji, who before I came to OTS was the chief secretary before sir. So they have both been good friends, I'm told, and I have had the honor of meeting sir after many, many years at his place where he treated me to some very lovely conversations and of course some lovely sharbat. So thank you very much, sir, for allowing us to do it and for guiding us. I also have my mentor here, Shri N.S. Sisodia ji, because every time IAS probationer comes into the service, he's given a mentor. So my mentor is also here. And thank you very much, sir, for guiding me through the whole process today. I have so many of my seniors in the audience. Thank you so much for your kind presence here. Of course, Sudhansh Pant sir was my collector when I was ADM 1 in Jaipur. Another very special person who will be doing the moderation today, being in conversation with sir. So it's a very special, dais we have. And of course, Venkateshwaran sir, I'm extremely grateful to you, sir, because the venue got changed at the last moment. You've accommodated us. Sir, of course, is heading the OTS and is in charge of this very lovely room that we are doing the conversation today. I will not come between you and the conversation and our esteemed guest today. It is my very humble honor to have Shri Arun Kumarji to kindly introduce the session today and also introduce our author and speaker for the day. Sir.
Well, my dear friend Inderjit Khanna, Usha Sharma ji, और Venkateshwaran ji नहीं नजर आ रहे हैं, and all the friends here. I'm very happy that this session has been jointly organized by the IAS All India Services Pensioners Association, the IAS Association, and the State Institute of Public Administration for talking about the book Flashes Before My Eyes, The Civil Service and More, authored by Shri Inderjit Khanna. Most of us know Shri Khanna, but for the benefit of others, let me tell you that after finishing his college education at the prestigious St. Stephen's College, Delhi, he joined the IAS in 1966. Shri Khanna held important assignments under the state government like Director of Education, Commissioner, Tribal Area Development, and Secretary to the government in Planning, Energy, and Finance departments. He held important assignments under the central government like Joint Secretary in the Rural Development Ministry, Additional Secretary, and Special Secretary in the Department of Economic Affairs in the Ministry of Finance, and Director Enforcement. What distinguishes Shri Khanna's career is that he held two assignments outside the normal IAS cadre posts. He served as visiting professor at the prestigious Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, and as secretary, University Grants Commission. While working in the Rural Development Ministry and at the IIM, he prepared several reports on various subjects. He also did some consultancy assignments at the IIM Ahmedabad. Shri Khanna retired as Chief Secretary of Rajasthan at the end of 2002. Thereafter, he served a term of 5 years as State Election Commissioner. Presently, he is looking after the Geeta Mittal Foundation, an organization for skill development. He is also actively involved in several other organizations, including our pensioners organization. Coming to the flashes before my eyes, I must say it is an extremely interesting book. Others who have read it will wholly agree with me. Unlike other memoirs, the story of author's personal life and his professional life have been interwoven so well that once you start reading the book, you cannot keep it down. So much interest is generated that you want to know what happened next. Going to his childhood, one day when Inderjit's father saw him playing Gulli Danda in the violence of Daryaganj in Delhi, he thought that his son should go to a boarding school lest he falls in undesirable company. That is how he landed up in the Sherwood College in Nainital, where he had his school education. Sending their son to an expensive school, which they could ill afford, shows the importance his parents attached to good education. I had the privilege of meeting Inder's as well as his wife Yasmin's parents and also his elder brother and sister. I have known the family very well. Inderjit's parents made a great sacrifice for his education. His elder brother and sister had an important role in guiding him about his career. In his book, Inder has expressed gratitude and indebtedness to his parents at several places. We do not realize how much our parents do for us, but this aspect has been brought out very well in the flashes before my eyes. Being in the government, we all know how transfers disrupt our life. Packing and unpacking our things, staying in circuit house, looking for accommodation, and most important, shifting our children from school to school. In this regard, Inderjit got full support from his wife Yasmin and his daughter Shonali. They never complained about anything and took all dislocations and inconvenience of transfer in their stride. Inder has given all credit to his family for his being at peace in office. An important aspect of the book is the emphasis the author has placed on the supportive role of the family in one's life. I have already mentioned the important assignments held by Sheikh Khanna under the state and central governments. At all places, he did extremely well, and his work was highly appreciated by his seniors. But more importantly, he has mentioned at more than one place that the job he did was a great learning experience. I have already mentioned that the two stints Inderjit had outside the normal IAS postings, the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, and the University Grants Commission. How well he did at both the places can be judged by the reluctance of the management of both the places to relieve Shri Khanna at the end of his tenure. But he had to leave for various reasons. I would like to quote what he has to say about his working in these two institutions. My interactions with best of educationists at Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, and during my work at University Grants Commission with educationists throughout the country, I am sure greatly enhanced my personal capabilities. This is the approach required in life, the spirit to learn. Having joined a service, one should not think that there is nothing more to be achieved. Learning is a lifelong process. I personally feel that to achieve something worthwhile in life, three things are essential. First, your dedication and hard work, जिसको हम पुरुषार्थ कहते हैं. Second is the blessing of one's parents and elders in the family. And the most important, grace of God. I know for sure Inderjit had all the three in great abundance. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. That was very lucidly put, and I think it all made us very, very nostalgic. Thank you, sir. We really look forward to hearing more from you. May I, at this juncture in the program, invite our Chief Secretary, ma'am, to say a few words. Can you go there? Sure. Whichever go there. I'll go there. It'll make me more comfortable.
Good morning to all of you. In all my humility, I must confess that it's a very, very difficult moment for me to be a chief guest of an occasion where all my gurus and mentors are sitting, except one, that is Dr. Abbas, before I wish to there. So I'm really grateful to you for making me the chief guest of this occasion. And I must share here, sir, that you were called as Stitch. Was told to me by Dr. Abbas. When you were the chief secretary, once I happened to go to his place and said कि मुझे chief secretary सर से बहुत डर लगता है. दिल्ली से आए हैं, कुछ पता नहीं है कैसे है. So I have to share this with you, sir, and with everyone. He said, बहुत नरम दिल के हैं, टिच हैं वो हमारे लिए. बाहर से बहुत सख्त हैं, लेकिन अंदर से बहुत ही सॉफ्ट किस्म के व्यक्ति हैं. So that gave us the confidence to sort of share all our anxieties, grievances with you, sir. And I must very honestly admit, sir, I have the highest respect for you for being what you are. I've yet to come across a person like you who withstood in all times, in all adversities, sir, saying what you actually felt. It's not easy. Having given 37 years of my service, in this journey, sir, I also feel that I have changed a lot. I started like you, but I'm not like you right now, and I feel I have not done good to myself. This book, so honestly, I went through 3 chapters, and as Mr. Amitabh Bachchan said in his foreword, it's a beautiful narration, and you actually feel that the author is sitting right next to you and is doing a storytelling, sir. When I was going through these chapters, sir, I wish I didn't have to go to the office, and I wish I had the time to finish the book, but I promised to myself that one holiday I'm going to, from morning till evening, I'm going to finish this book, sir. As he says that flashes before my eyes. Uh, it's a beautiful narration. It's like a storytelling, and the way he describes you, sir. Rich was my classmate in Sherwood, approximate desk in the class, the next bed in our common dormitory. Despite his size, he was a feisty young fellow in all his activities in the school. I mean, so beautifully described, sir. And your association with Mr. Amitabh Bachchan, sir, it speaks volumes about you, sir. I feel that possibly you must be the only civil servant, sir, that you visited in a cab Amitabh Bachchan's house, and you had no embarrassment in saying that I wish to go back by the car as it will take 3 hours to reach your place. Sir, I don't think so anyone can say this. Sir. It speaks volumes, and I'm really proud of it. So the training part, your father saying, whispering in your ear, do forgive me if I did anything wrong. It, as Shri Arun Kumarji said, again, it speaks of the grooming and the sacrifices which your parents made when they sent you to Sherwood, or when they decided that you should be a civil servant. You really lived up to the expectations of your parents, and I wish all of us were like that. So your journey as collector, you were shifted from Barmer in 3 months. You came to Banswara. You didn't even know that you being shifted when your divisional commissioner asked you कि आप बांसवाड़ा से जयपुर जाएंगे या आप बाड़मेर से जाएंगे, तो आपको उस समय समझ में नहीं आया. And then later you realize you've been picked up by none less than Shri Haridev Joshi, considering the outstanding officer you were, and he decided that you should go to Banswara. Sir, you're returning. I mean, these are some of the very, very interesting episodes I felt sharing with everyone when you were the returning officer, and you were responsible for the Lok Sabha elections um, of Lok Sabha elections. And when CM wanted to talk to you, you said, no, I will not till I finish the counting. Who would say it in today's time, sir? I don't think. So then your close shave when you were driving, and when your driver was taking you through a bridge and the rope broke, and how you sort of got saved, the presence of mind, your sensibilities and sensitivities, remember to describe this in the book. Again, sir, shows how sensitive you were as a person towards people who worked with you. And you remembered all this till today. And I have to say that the pandemic has done a lot of good. It gave you all the time to write the book. And I was just surprised that you remembered every bit of it, that you cared to make a mention of all this, sir, in your book. And then your stint, and I was selfish enough to start the book from the Chief Secretary's Rajasthan chapter. I thought I'll be able to learn something out of it, and I was so correct. I said, let me be selfish enough to sort of learn through some of the things which I can imbibe during this current tenure of mine as Chief Secretary, sir. Much against your wishes, sir, you agreed to come from Delhi to join as Chief Secretary. Who would do this? All of us. I mean, it's one of the dream assignments all civil servants have, and you did share this concern with the chief minister, who's presently also the chief minister of the state, sir, that my family wishes to be in Delhi, my daughter wishes to be in Delhi, and then when chief minister requested, you agreed, and then you decided to come. Sir, you've so well mentioned the famous American economist Milton Friedman, who said, best government is the least government. The statement till today is the essence of the government and how the government should be. I mean, I'll not read out the entire thing, sir, but I'll just read out the last four sentences where you make a mention of the relationship between the public representatives and the bureaucracy, sir. Where you said, I have, however, found that fairly often the government and its representatives take the role of interface rather than facilitators. On the contrary, representatives of the government have to do the hand-holding of those who are in need and then, at the appropriate time, slowly withdrawal when the handheld person is able to stand on his or her own feet. This is the true test of good governance. It's so correctly said. And some of your major challenges in terms of mitigating the employee strike, conducting the local government election despite the strike, the challenge was impending droughts, how well this was managed, and uh, your uh, having association with Bill Gates, then organizing the President of America's visit, and later mentioning what he said about his visit and about you. And during this entire thing, you did not miss the contribution shown by ma'am, Yasmin ma'am, though you were not giving her any time, and yet she she did so much for the house and for you, and the sacrifices she made towards your achievements is uh, whatever. I mean, you could have mentioned a lot, but you gave the space to others, and her contribution towards the garden, the nursery is something we would always remember, sir. The house I live in the garden, it's really makes me feel that so much must have been contributed by her. That is how the place looks so beautiful. Other day, a file had come to me in terms of deciding on the post of cadre and ex-cadre post for IAS and IPS. When I was reading your book and the narration on this fact, I could so much relate to the anxieties we have while we take a call on these proposals, sir. Then on your relationship with the judiciary, sir, uh, one of the episodes, there was a particular murder case in Udaipur. In mid-November 2000, the division bench of High Court issued an order that I should inquire into certain matters in relation to this murder and report within a month. After due inquiry, I did submit my report, and CJ even called me to his residence to discuss certain aspects of the report. This entire event was quite unusual, and if I may say so, seemed to reflect the confidence that the High Court had in my work. And the CJ Lakshmanan, he said, our Chief Secretary, Mr. Inderjit Khanna, has acted as a bridge between the High Court and the government. Whenever I requested him to meet me for discussion with reference to the affairs of the institution, he did so readily, and after due discussion with me, he would also carry out my request and directions on many occasions. I was following this approach, and now after going through this, I'll further re-ensure that I do this like you did as Chief Secretary. I mean, there's so much to mention, but considering the time constraints, sir, I'll not take much of a time, but I have to read out this on the way he did the assessment of officers while writing the ACR, sir. In whispered tones, I would sometimes receive feedback, and I was rather tough in my approach towards officers. By implication, my evaluation of officers was somewhat harsh. I have often wondered, is calling a spade wrong? I certainly do not think so. I have tried to analyze the evaluation done by me of IAS officers in the 3 years of my holding charge as Chief Secretary. In each of the 3 years, I seem to have ended up evaluating 1/3 of the officers in the IAS cadre of Rajasthan as outstanding. This could be in my capacity as reporting, reviewing, or as an accepting officer. By no stretch of imagination could this be called tough evaluation. Obviously, not everyone can be graded as outstanding. Recently, in early 2021, while talking to one of the Rajasthan cadre officers who was now working as Secretary to Government of India, I was happy to find that officer acknowledging that for two batchmates, the remarks on their ACRs given by me when they were collectors helped me in their empanelment at senior levels in Government of India. And the officer is me, I told him. So in my growth as Joint Secretary, Additional Secretary and Secretary Government of India, Shri Inderjit Khanna has a huge role to play, and I'm ever grateful to you, sir. As he says, personal life in the civil service is not a bed of roses. The civil servant faces many issues and problems on the personal front during his service career. First is the issue of a rather meager salary, and then he takes us through the journey of how he started, what was his saving when he retired, and how he would have suffered if he was not given the job of state election commissioner. We can't agree more on this, sir. And yet, despite all this, you've been the way you are, sir, today. Sir, there's so much to share, but I'll not take much of everyone's time. I'll stop here, sir, but we respect you hugely, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I didn't know there was another person who who has been at the in a nice way receiving end of sir's grace and benevolence. So speaking about the ACR, I think sir, aapka tirchi nazar shayad maybe I fall also in the 1/3, because after I read that chapter, I went back to look at what you did in my ACR. But I have to also tell you something now that we are on the ACR issue. I'm sure, sir, will. I have two bosses here who evaluated me differently on ACRs, both in a good way. And I have to mention this, sir, about you here because we are on the thing of ACRs. And today the ACR is your presence here on this session, I think, for all of us who are seated here and doing this. So when Sudhansh Pansa wrote my ACR, I was really overwhelmed because I thought I did not deserve it. And I called him and I said, sir, ye thoda zyada nahi ho gaya. So then sir told me, this is what I think. And if you don't think the way I think, then rise up and be who you are. And this is one thing that I've learned from you. And I've always tried to follow his example of writing ACR for people, and maybe a little bit of Khanna sir's also, to call a spade a spade. So with these words, sir, may I now ask the gentleman to speak a little about the book and his times. I know this must be a very, very special moment, very nostalgic moment, but we are really wanting to hear from you, sir. Yes, of course, a little bit about the book, and then I will invite Shri Sudhansh Pansa, who is currently the chairperson of the Pollution Control Board, who is our lead discussant today, who will be in conversation with sir. Sir.
Thank you, all of you, for being present. It's a great source of encouragement for me. Thank you, ladies first, Usha ji, for her wonderful, kind remarks. Thank you, Arun. Who has been like an elder brother. Naren, who has organized this, and Kateshwaran, who has very, very quickly and endearingly agreed to host this in this very fine hall and in this very fine building. Sudhansh, for agreeing to be here and all of you for your presence. OTS has a special place in our life. My batchmate, late Obi, had his wife visualized here. 4 of us, IC, OP, Jumki, and myself. I think we were the first occupants of the hostel in 1967 when we came down from Missouri. And IC used to cycle. And when we used to go out to the market, all of us together, sometimes I will share the inner feelings of OP because he was about to get married with Muzla. That was our life. 4 of us were here for the whole year, better part also in the district. What I want to mention is not so much about the book, but the why and the how. The book, of course, if you read, it's all right. You see, I was not wanting to write an autobiography. I thought that it's pointless because everybody will naturally try to pick up things that he has found that he has done something and gloss over that which he may not have done or where he stumbled. Then I still remember on this 3rd of December 2020, of course, pandemic was very much on. And I saw a 3 or 4 minute WhatsApp message. Incidentally, it happened to be of Mr. Amitabh Bachchan, where he talked of 3 things. He was giving a talk somewhere. And one, he said about the sacrifice of his parents. There were 2 brothers. The other, he said, is the importance that the parents gave for educating those 2 boys. And the third, he said about our school. And I know Akansha is sitting there, and I purposely requested her to come because she is also from Sherwood and the only one probably in the city other than myself. That what Sherwood gave him, Amitabh, and obviously his brother. And that day I thought to myself, I said, in the circumstances that he has mentioned, I think my parents were not as well off, number 1. Number 2, there were 2 siblings. In my case, we were 3. So though my parents may not have been so well off economically and financially, they probably had to struggle even harder to give us what we got. The importance that they gave us, the best of education that they could. And finally, what education gave us. And I just want to revert to a movie that I have seen just a few days ago called Dasmi. I don't know how many of you have seen it. The last few sentences that Abhishek is the younger brother, Abhishek says, he's told he will be chief minister again. He said, "Nahi, main chief minister nahi banna chahta. Main shiksha mantri banuna." That was the lesson he had learned while being in jail, how important education was. He was only 8th pass and he wanted to do his 10th class. And that is indeed what, in most cases, all, Ashok will acknowledge, Naren will acknowledge, Arun will acknowledge, that this is what our education gave us, which enabled us to do a little bit in life. The writing of the book, and my publisher is here, Praneeth. I acknowledge the help that he has given to me in writing it. I was referred to Praneeth by Malavika. He published 2 books for her, one for her father, and one for her mother. And I have found, and I think now Mr. K.K. Bhatnagar has also gone to him. So it's very helpful and very good. It's a laborious job. There's a lot of research. I happen to write a diary and still do every day in the evening. If I'm out on tour, I don't carry it with me. I note it down on a slip of paper, come back and enter it. But that apart from 1967, I've been writing it. And it's easy for me to refer to shelves of my cupboard in my house or with them. God alone knows what my grandchildren will do with them. But still, they are there, and that helped me a lot. The publication has been a learning process. Usha ji mentioned, and I agree, that learning really never will stop. Till we hit the grave, it will not stop. Every day there is something we learn. And to that extent, the publication process has also been a learning. The last 6-7 months from October onwards, interactions with Praneeth, even finding a publisher was a learning process. I had to, in fact, one of the so-called better publishers, I had to say, sorry, I'm not going to change the design of my book just because you feel that there's too much emphasis on personal life. I said, no. why did I write this book? I have often felt that, well, my grandchildren have been happy, they're fortunate, I should say, to see all four of their grandparents. We saw none. Maybe I was an unfortunate person, but I neither saw my mother's side parents nor my father's. And that's why I feel that these children must know what the previous generations, what their predecessors have gone through, which they don't. I may tell them sometimes, but it will not hit them. But as a document now, it remains whether they like it or not for the next 50, 100 years. It is going to be down the line. And my sister's children and grandchildren are in America. They know nothing. When those two grandchildren of my sister come to India, they are at a loss. They see camels on the road and buffaloes on the road and monkeys running around, the way we live. And children don't realize, my grandchildren, when I tell them, I said, beta, हमारे घर में मोटर कार का सवाल नहीं, टू व्हीलर का सवाल नहीं, रेफ्रिजरेटर का सवाल नहीं, टेलीफोन का सवाल नहीं, एयर कंडीशनर का तो सवाल ही नहीं. And they sometimes tell me, नाना कैसे होता था? मैंने कहा होता था, चलती थी जिंदगी. And I tried to mention a few incidents where parents used to, how to keep the milk cool at night, how to keep the sun out in the summer, those type of things, which children today do not just appreciate. They have got things, I can say, on a platter. Partly our fault, maybe, but that is the way of life. And I wanted it to be for them. And that is why I did not think of publishing it. I thought I will have it printed and circulated to friends. But when 3 people reviewed it for me before I went in, this was July, August. My batchmate Shailaja was 1. Our cadre mate Matthew was the 2nd. And my friend from IIM Ahmedabad, Professor T. Rao, was the 3rd. They gave me their comments, very helpful comments. And without exception, each of the 3 said, you can't leave it in the private domain. You must put it in the public domain. So I thought to myself, all right, I will do it. I am not unhappy because friends and family members, particularly who are reading the book, become nostalgic and they keep on telling me interactions which I also don't know. But Shailaja tells me the times when she used to come to my house, for the little flat that we had, talking to my mother or father. I mean, she is recollected. Then she talks about her own parents. She is recollected. My father visiting her mother on a bicycle, all sorts of things. It makes me happy. So I think these are the type of thrills that I have got, at least in writing the book. To more serious matters, civil and service, because that is our bread and butter. It was, of course, I think my brother played a fantastic role in terms of moving me in this direction. St. Stephen's is a place, where we have an open mind. I started by wanting to be an engineer. Within 1 year, I changed. I said civil service. By the 2nd and 3rd year, looking at the nice things in the army life, I used to go to my brother, who was a bachelor, mess life, drinking in the evening in the mess, playing tennis, doing this, that. I thought that these army officers, they don't really work. All the time they are in their shorts, running around here and there. Ashok Mithing, the IPS people also do that. And I applied for the army in my BSc final year in St. Stephen's. And by my luck, I got in and I cleared the medical examination. My brother came down from the dark running. He said, 2 brothers in the army are not desirable. I am serving the country. You serve it in the civil service. I said, how on earth do I know? Here is the job which is there. I can join and get a grade 1 salary and all that. He said, never mind. That was his confidence in my capability. I don't know whether I had it or not, but it reassured me. And of course, subsequently, then I went into trying to be IAS. Civil and service, I just make a sentence. Service, very simply, seva. I think every single, there are a few youngsters, there's one, I think, from 2007 batch who is here. Well, he's senior now, 14 years, 15 years. That's what it is all about, seva. And service, I'm going to give you a negative example of what it is not about. That is the civil part of it. Arun heard it from me the other day, but I will repeat it. The chief secretary has a head of department come to meet him. And the head of department brings the deputy who is happened to be dealing with the file. Not Usha, huh? The chief secretary ushers the director, head of department, says, please sit down. Looks at the deputy and says, who are you? And when the deputy is also moving towards the chair, keep standing. Then the head of department intervened and said, sir, I have brought the person, happened to be a lady, unfortunately. So he mellowed down. Now that is uncivil. And if a person is uncivil with a junior officer, what will he be with others and what will he be with the poor man? That is my concern. That is not being civil. I'm citing this, I haven't quoted this example in the book, but this hurts. Training is the most important, and that Venkateswaran is here. It is also neglected by governments, in Government of India and in the state government. I don't think, pardon my saying, so Usha may feel offended, they give training the importance that should be given, because that is where you are building the person. And they are spending so much, 2 years is spent on our training. Colossal amount of money is spent at the public cost at our training. I think this requires much more emphasis. I remember my director at Basuri, fantastic person, import card. Many professionals did not like it. Classroom was closed, some of you may have heard. 9 o'clock meant 9 o'clock, doors closed, you are out, casual leave, and maybe leave without pay. But everybody came in time. He was on the riding ground. He was on the PT ground. When we had a evening discussion, he was there, invited us for it. So he was totally involved in what we were doing. Mohinder Singh of 50 batch was our director, staying on the campus, inviting us for tea, and we were 4 of us. I don't know whether OP related, there were any incidents when we used to go to Mohinder Singh's house, he and his wife staying in the house in front. So the training is the crux of the matter. I think that enables us to do whatever little we can. Service I have looked at, and I now feel that we can divide our 35 years into 3 portions. The first 10 years are learning. Training if you want, but learning. Collector, SDO, great learnings. Deputy secretaries. In fact, when Arun rang me up, I still remember I was in Bhavina, Jasmine and I were there. And he said, you are coming to planning department. So I thought to myself, Deputy Secretary jaunga bhai. It was 78. I had 12 years service, selection grade bhi nahi mila tha. And then his letter came to me, Indian form, maybe I have it with me. Nene, you are coming as special secretary. And why I thought I was deputy secretary? Because already Arun had a 67 batch person. So I thought maybe deputy secretary jaunga. But a 12 years service, and we were interacting with the chief secretary. There were no secretaries at that time in planning and finance and personnel. So Arun will admit that we junior officers had the ear of the chief secretary, which I'm sure they have even today. Very affectionate. I must relate this incident to you. I don't think I was able to do that. I hope Usha will be able to do that. When our Sonali was born, she came late in the day because she came after 8 years. Mr. Banot was the chief secretary. I was at that time planning special secretary. Mrs. Banot, God bless her, she's very much alive, 90 years old, knitted a woolen frock for her. Can you imagine? Came to our house 11 days after Sonali was born. I mentioned this. Now, I don't think as a chief secretary, even I did it, I must confess. But that was the type of love and affection senior officer gave us. There are so many incidents I can relate. Khanna Saab, stiff man. Stiff man, I'm sure all the seniors of my vintage will agree. But at the bottom of it all, they were softness. Vinod Pandey, I know all of us have known. When he arrived as Secretary Rural Development, shunted out from Revenue Department and Ministry of Finance by Mr. Rajiv Gandhi, I got a telephone call from, we were 7 joint secretaries. I was in Ajmer that day. अरे यार ये आपके कार्टर वाले आ गए, he is meant to be a terror. I said भाई मैंने तो कभी काम नहीं किया. अरुण नोस तुझे उनके घर के पर्दे जल गए थे. उनके घर के टेनेंट थे, वो बैचलर थे, सिगरेट बहुत पीते थे. In any case. So I said, "Bhai, main nahi unke saath kabhi kaam nahi." But I tell you, 2 years I worked with Mr. Vinod Pandey. A beautiful boss. हाँ, idiot बोलते थे मेरे को. Idiot क्या कर रहा है बिल्कुल? But that idiot was an affectionate, endearing term. So the juniors should not take that amiss if the boss calls them a bloody fool or an idiot. It's, and the heart. I remember he called up, he was cabinet secretary, he called up my wife once and told, Yasmin used to hear stories about him from me. Sunday night, रात को 9 बजे. She said, ये market गया मैं. अच्छा, वापस आए तो कहना मुझे, he used to speak very rough. वापस आए तो कहना मुझे फोन करते. 9:45 I rang you. सारे वक्त घूमता रहता है. मैंने कहा सर मार्केट गया. अच्छा, मार्केट की बात बोलो, कल सुबह प्राइम मिनिस्टर को प्रेजेंटेशन करना. Now cabinet secretary telling a little joint secretary, tough going. Because he had been with, I had been with him in the ministry, maybe he took that luxury to tell me. In any case, 10 बजे on Panchayati Raj constitutional amendment. मैंने कहा भाई जो. I told him, I said, sir, Devilal ji is not here. He's deputy prime minister. He said, आए नहीं आए, देख लेना. Secretary को ले आना. I could not get Secretary Shankar. 12 o'clock at night, I got Mr. Shankar. He said, what's the problem? I said, sir, 10 o'clock in the morning, we have to appear before Prime Minister with a presentation. He said, what will you do? I said, sir, you please come to my office at 9. I'll give you something. So overnight, of course, naturally one had to work. And that's what I've said, be ready for challenges because they will come your way. So, well, we gave that presentation. It went on for a little longer because they had passed it in the cabinet, as always happens, when they want to do something, but didn't know what it was all about. So the PM wanted to be, well informed the next morning, the Monday morning, and the discussion went on. 75 years of independence. Quickly, I'll divide it into 4 parts. Arun always keeps telling me, and we discuss when ML, God bless his soul, was alive. 3 of us used to sit together and discuss. We do feel, and with apologies to the younger people who are here, that there is a going down of national character at large. Not that we are saints, we are not saints. But we do feel that something about values is missing today. It's always said of the older generation, उनको तो पता ही नहीं ज़माने बदलते हैं. Maybe ज़माने ज़रूर बदलते हैं और कुछ हद तक हमको भी ज़मानों के हिसाब से. But I think there is some fall in that national character. And the first period I divide, and why that fervor was there up to 47 to 75, before emergency. It was the freedom struggle. We may not have been part of the freedom struggle, but we felt it through our parents. The partition, heard stories, sometimes saw and remembered. That impacted us. And then 3 wars impacted us. Wars are not good. 62, 65, 71. They are not good. But I think that fervor was kept alive because of the wars. 75 was a watershed emergency. Not a very good time. And thereafter, I've also said about the foreign secretary being sacked by the prime minister in a public meeting. Not good, but it happened. So that comes up to 1990. Then you have the governments which are meant to be coalition governments. The 2 of them lasted very long and were very stable. Narasimha Rao and Mr. Vajpayee. And I had the good fortune of working in Mr. Narasimha Rao's time and in Mr. Vajpayee's time. No problems, though they were not majority government. And then the coalitions, and then finally now this period of 8 years, which is a single, it's coalition, but it's for all practical purposes, it is a one-party government. There are misgivings. I don't know which is the better situation, having a minority government and a coalition, or a full-time party, which we sometimes hear is bulldozing its way through. Leave it for you to guess. Another, sorry, I'm going a little longer. Things which are a little depressing. Color, caste, religion, state. When I start identifying with these, I'm doing harm to myself and my country. And I want to give you 2 examples. Incidentally, in sacrifice, please see Montague, my boss, he has written backstage. His father gave up getting into the All India Service, Cantonment Account Service, just to ensure that Montague was able to study in school in Delhi. He remained in subordinate account service, the father. He has acknowledged it. And then there's another book, not civil servant, Code Name God, written by a gentleman called Mani Bhaume. How his Bengali, 41, Bengal famine, war. And he says his grandmother, probably his grandmother, had more interaction. Father had gone off with Gandhiji and all that. And he says his grandmother used to starve herself to feed this little boy so that he lived and she ultimately died of starvation. This is the type of sacrifice. I forgot this. Now, caste, color, and religion, and I want to relate on color, but the same thing can apply to caste and religion and regional factors. Michelle Obama, her autobiography, Becoming. Incidentally, all these are happening. I'm not a great reader, but while writing my autobiography, I was reading some of these books. As President Barack Obama, his elder daughter, about 12, 13 years in Washington, going to school. One day, the teacher complained to Michelle Obama, your daughter is not submitting her homework. So she was surprised. She said, and she confronted the daughter who was 12 or 13 and said, Malia, what are you doing? He said, no, my homework is all here. So she said, but your teacher says you are not submitting it. Quiet. Daughter did not, she had no answer. The Obamas appointed a counselor to go to the school. And the counselor came back reporting that that girl was being ostracized by the other students. उसके साथ खाना नहीं खाएं, उसके साथ बात नहीं करें, क्योंकि she was dark. And then they changed her school. This is the President of the United States. This is years 2010 and later. And I'll give you another example, no names in this case, but coming home to Jaipur. Child studying in one of the best schools in Jaipur. Discriminated against, this is all 2010, on grounds of color, happened to be dark. The child's school was changed. Now, is this the country that we see for ourselves? I really wonder. The similar thing you can take on to, as I said, caste, unfortunate. There are incidents, but I won't mention them. I have mentioned some in my book. But these are some things which I somehow, it's upbringing for everybody. I mean, all of you have gone through it. Never came into our mind who we made friends with, who sat next to me, who sat the other side. All of these people are here. Ashok is here, Narendra is here, Arun is here. This did not come into our mind how we made friends. But that's the first thing. Sometimes it is thrown at you by some subordinate. It has been thrown at me, I know. That where discrimination is taking place is not so. Religion is another one. And finally is the state. Unfortunate for the country if these things carry on. Of course, they have all mentioned, so I must express my profound thanks to Arun for all the beautiful things, but let me tell you the other side. I was still a probationer in Kota, and Arun came on his first promotion as Deputy Commissioner of Commercial Taxes. I used to stay alone. I was a bachelor and eat at the circuit house. From the very day, that was November, I remember I joined in July, Arun and Varsha and that little son who is now not so little, Sanju. Arun would religiously pick me up in the afternoon. I was in the collectorate, the probationer, pick me up. They were staying near the station road in Kota, take me for lunch, bring me back, drop me, and then go on to his deputy commissioner's office. In the evening, more often than not, I was eating with them, two-wheeler pe jata tha. So that is where our association, and as I said, my elder brother started. When I used to come to Jaipur, even as a bachelor or married, Yasmin and I would stay. Arun was posted here with Varsha and Arun. And I think I have to acknowledge the Varsha having suffered, both of us, for so many times. I remember when I bought this plot of mine, I came in from Delhi. It was an auction. And staying with Arun, I took his car, RJW 15. They're all nostalgia events. And I came from that place. RJW 15. So I drove it and brought it to the auction site. Sat down. I had come in from Delhi. So at the end, I had calculated, I had sold the house that I had constructed in Ajmer, and I knew कि मुझे 1.5 लाख रुपए देने हैं plot के, इससे एक ढेला मेरे पास नहीं है, a little bit leftover money I'll have to keep for the building. Every time the boli went up, I would keep on, mentally calculating. I remember Mohan Mukherjee as finance secretary told me, "Your math student, you will end up." It was prophetic, but it happened just by the way. In any case, I kept counting. And God is above. I don't know what happened. At 1,49,000, two of us had been left. The chap backed out. And then when I went to pay the first installment, cash in my pocket, 8,000-10,000, which had to be paid to JDA. But Nagar Saab is sitting here. I think he ultimately approved the file. The chap looked at me and he said, "Inderjit Khanna, आप IAS में हो? आपने पहले क्यों नहीं बताया? बिठा देते उसको." But that is so family and spouse, the support you get, I think it is phenomenal at every stage. We don't see, the point is that particularly for the girls, ladies who are not working. Usha is working, she is working, but for those who are not working, and I mind when I was getting married, I had told my wife, she had done her BA and obviously was ready to start working. And I said, "Look, I know this service, nasty in that respect, because they don't care a damn of where you are, they just shove you out." And it happened. बाड़मेर से बहुत खुश थे. 25 दिन में सत्यप्रसन्न जी दोनों कहाँ से आ रहे हो, बांसवाड़ा से या बाड़मेर से? मैंने कहा, "सर मैं तो बाड़मेर में हूँ." So this is shunted around. That is of no concern to government. आप कब हो, कितने दिन हो, बच्चे कहाँ पढ़ रहे हैं, पैकिंग वाइज करती रहेगी. आजकल तो बड़े ग्रांट मिलते हैं, उस टाइम पे तो कुछ नहीं था. You and your Johnnies who were in the house who were supporting you did all the gunny bags, paper, this, that. So the family is a tremendous support, which we as civil servants and male, probably chauvinists a little bit, don't realize, don't acknowledge at that point of time, which is unfortunate. Never. My batchmates, other half sitting here, I have to forgive us, Midullah, if I can make that plea, that probably we are overwhelmed and drowned in our work. वो घूमता रहता है हमारे दिमाग में. So if at all, a forgiveness. बहुत incidents हैं which I have related, where when I went from Jaipur, my bungalow on that Hirabad, nice big bungalow, huge compound, 2-3 servants' quarters. My wife and family, little Sonali, was used to it. Landed in Ahmedabad of our own volition, and she had accepted. मैंने कहा था Ahmedabad जा रहे हैं. She said, "चलो तुम दोस्त हो, अच्छा है, चलते हैं." I think my flat must have been half the size of this room. Total 3 rooms. छोटे कमरे. When she reached there and saw it, never a grudge. Adjusted. So that is the type of support that our better halves give us. I'm sure mine is not an isolated case, but I only want the male spouse to sort of dwell on this issue of what their families have done for them. Of course, children's education and the type of difficulties that we face. In fact, I mentioned Shailaja telling me, थानेदार का बच्चा कॉन्वेंट ऑफ जीसस सेंट मेरी दिल्ली में एडमिट हो जाएगा, IAS ऑफिसर का बच्चा 4 बार आप प्रिंसिपल के कमरे के बाहर ठहरिए, तब शायद आपको अपॉइंटमेंट मिल जाए. थानेदार के बच्चे को एडमिशन मिल जाएगा. चलिए, कोई बात नहीं. The problems that we face, housing, children's education, transfers, uncertainty, APO. I was also APO 3 times in my life. But these are issues which come up, and the only constant is change. It always happens in our life. And I'll give that example. When I told my wife that she should not work, she very kindly accepted. When the turn came of my daughter and our daughter, both of us were very sure that she must be professionally qualified and work. My granddaughter, again, when I talked to her, she's ready. She said, "I'm going to come." So times change our mind and thinking. My wife, I said, "Please don't work." My daughter, I said, "You stand on your own feet." And I think it's a good thing. Granddaughter should also be standing on her own feet. Performance appraisal you have mentioned, it's a very, very tricky subject. It's a very necessary issue, very difficult. And I again analyze. In my UPSC interview, I got only 40%. And when I got the mark sheets, I felt, yeah, I am such an average person. 40% is average. I was talking to Matthew. Matthew was also a little disappointed. He said he got 50 only. The 40 to or become, that's why I came down the ladder and got about 40 in the seniority list. But the director gives you an assessment and he gives you after 1 year. So he has seen larger, वो तो आधे घंटे में तो आपको 40% दे दिया. एक साल बाद, when he gave his assessment and that was added to our marks in the UPSC, मुझे second highest marks मिले. So I often wonder to myself, am I that average person which the UPSC evaluated me? Or am I a little better than the average, which the director thought that I require in the same 120, that I am the second highest marks. In fact, my bestmate Babchu asked me, he said, तुमने रखे हैं? मैंने कहा बिल्कुल वो UPSC की लिस्ट है मेरे पास कि हमको इतने marks दे. Reward system. Many youngsters feel that we are not monetarily rewarded by government for good performance. Bhairu Singh ji used to say, सरकार में तो घरे और घोड़े एक ही हिसाब से मापे जाते हैं. You will bear me out. He has said that on a number, which is true, unfortunately. True. But does the government have a गधे कभी, Arun is saying, गधे कभी कभी आगे भी बढ़ जाते हैं. Very true, very unfortunate. But the point is, with such a large number, lakhs and lakhs of employees, can you have another system? But where is the satisfaction for the individual? And I'll tell you, it is by the action of your superior. And in your case, and I must confess, maybe I was not doing that, what you do for your subordinates. Small examples. I'll give you just one. Of course, the letters I have given here, the type of letters that I got from my collectors as an SDO, what I got from the chief secretary as the collector, and I must confess, maybe I don't remember a single letter as chief secretary I wrote congratulating the collectors. I don't remember. But Mohan Mukherjee wrote. And that was 2-3 years after I left the district. Some revenue campaign and good things were done. I don't know. Anil Vodia writing to me, I was an SDM in Indira Gandhi visited. In those days, the Prime Minister used to stay overnight at Ajmer Circuit House. Very affectionate letters, endearing. When my unfortunate bad habit was to keep such letters. I remember Harish Pandey was my first collector when I went to Raishin Nagar. I saw his son, Sanjay. He was thrilled to see his father's letter to me. And very kind letter after the governor's visit. So these are all things which encourage. When I say monetary involvement and monetary benefits apart, they can't be given. It's very difficult. My son-in-law gets PLIs every year. Performance-linked indicator means some money is going up. In government, it's very difficult. But there's many other things that can be done. I remember another Anil Vodia case. I was SDM. December, my parents came for Christmas from Delhi. So naturally, I wanted to bring them to Jaipur. So I went to him and I said, sir, मुझे 2 दिन की छुट्टी चाहिए. छुट्टी क्यों चाहिए? मैंने कहा पेरेंट्स आए हुए, मैं जयपुर जाऊंगा. अच्छा, कैसे जाओगे? मैंने कहा सर बस से ले जाऊंगा. अच्छा, काम तो है सेक्रेटेरिएट में, गाड़ी ले जाना, आ जाना 2 दिन बाद. So that is the PLI for you. That's what I mean to say. I had to go to Chandigarh once with my wife. There was some family thing in Ludhiana. Ram Singh, Home Secretary. So I went to him, Deputy Secretary I was. So I said, sir, मुझे 2-3 दिन की छुट्टी चाहिए. जाना है, काम है, family. अच्छा, चंडीगढ़ जाओगे? ठीक है भाई, ठीक. वो रोडवेज की गाड़ी है ना, जाओ चंडीगढ़ में करके आओ. वो कई कॉन्ट्रैक्ट्स वगैरह, वो इंटरस्टेट एग्रीमेंट्स वगैरह साइन करने कर लेना, साथ में लुधियाना भी रुक जाना. So this is your PLI, is what I want to say. You don't need money. You need the hand of your superior on your head. I'm repeatedly confessing, I don't know whether I was able to do it, but that is the type of superiors that we enjoy. Postings and tenures, I mentioned lower level functionaries. Sometimes we tend to feel that our functionaries are not up to the mark. There are gems even amongst the lower division clerks. And Arun was also Deputy Secretary, Home Department. I have written in my book about 4 of them, right from LDC to a section officer, whom I remember name-wise even today, because they were so good in their work. And I was a freshling Deputy Secretary, district se aaye the, a little bit of filing work, this, that, and all. How so they encouraged us. They were the the brains who helped, and our subordinates can do that. They require little encouragement, but they are up to the mark. Boon se bhi ghada bharta hai. Today's context, something which Manmohan Singh ji, I've mentioned some incidents there. Today we are spending 8 lakh crores on oil import. 8 lakh crores annually. Prices of oil are going up. I remember Bhairu Singh ji introduced in 91, 92, but gave it up. No government cars on the road on a holiday. No government cars. Saving of petrol. Look at 20 cars with each minister today. We have stopped all the time. How many? I don't know. But these small things, that's why I say boond boond se kara barta hai. And that example of Dr. Manmohan Singh, I quote it when he told me, he said, आप मुझे छोड़ने जाओगे वापस फाइनेंस मिनिस्ट्री तो 10 किलोमीटर होगा, 1 लीटर पेट्रोल आप बचा लोगे. नंबर 1. दूसरा, this is the finance minister of the country telling me. It was not PM then. He said, 1.5 घंटा हो गया प्रोग्राम में. वो UGC का दफ्तर है, आपके कई लोग ठहरे होंगे. Please go meet them. Files will be on your table. Thinking of the man, at that level. Corruption. It is an evil. It is an evil, but it's an evil, unfortunately, in every country. It's ingrained into the system. I don't know what I can do. I have mentioned 3 things. Ek is example setting by politicians, by civil servants and officials. Then harsh action against corrupt officials. And thirdly, courts also must decide the matters quickly. I don't know whether it's political interference. Yes. Even as enforcement director yesterday or day before, Naren was asking me. There was, and I have said it in my chapter in the enforcement director. Minister even wrote to me that so and so is in Dubai. If you agree not to arrest him, he will come and join the investigation. And I wrote on the file, I said, okay, you can give no assurance. After 1 month, they didn't call me. Special director came to me, sir, मुझे तो बुलाया. Obviously, we all knew. मैंने कहा फाइल यहाँ छोड़ के जाओ, कागज एक भी नहीं ले जाना, बोल देना वहां पर कि मैंने लिख दिया है, no reply. Nothing happened to me. Maybe Supreme Court and all that, I don't know. And there are more examples than that, but that's what I say. So we in Rajasthan, and I must confess, again, I fall back on Arun, who will agree with me, has agreed with me, that we have been very lucky. This state, the type of politicians we have had are much better than many of the other states. And the younger people sitting at the back, one here, should be happy that they serve in the state of Rajasthan. You have your tips with ministers, it's not that. You will have your tips, but there'll always be somebody who will take care of in the service. Invariably. Just 2-3 points. Last. Ek to district notes, these are for the Chief Secretary to consider. District notes by the collector should be revived. Please, if you consider it. 2, emphasis on inspection by field officers. I remember, हम पटवारी के यहाँ भी जाते थे, किताबों के यहाँ भी जाते थे, SDO थे. Think about it. NEP, National Education Policy, very important. I have lots of things to say against it also. But it's a very important thing. As I said, education is extremely important. No political interference and transfer. You can transform the education department if there's no. It's very difficult to implement, but if it was not. District manual and secretariat manual. And I rest my case, as my friend P.N. Bandhari would say in the court, I rest my case. Sorry, I forget what you
So we now invite Pant to ask a few questions. If you want the mic.
It's a privilege and honor for me, sir, to have been given this role of having read this book and asking you something on it. I had purchased this book in December when I got to know that sir had written this. And I was lucky that it was available on Flipkart at that point of time, because I was told that subsequently it got sold out. So it was very interesting to go through the book. And one of the underlying themes, which has already been mentioned, is the spirit of sacrifice of the parents, of the spouse, not only in the case of the author, but also as he got inspired from the case of Amitabh Bachchan or Montek Singh. And even if I look around, even in my personal case, the first person in the family who have got an education in a so-called English medium school. None of my parents, my chachas, my mamas, anybody in the family had ever gone to an English school before me. So that way, people of my age group and even seniors, I think we all identify with the thing of the sacrifice which our parents did to give us a good education. Sir, you already mentioned about this. Second underlying theme which I noticed at many places was the protection of some invisible hand of God. Many places you have narrated it, whether it is the Panchayat Raj Act and you coming as the state election commissioner, or somewhere some divine protection which you experienced. So could you kindly share with the audience, sir, how much is your belief in this invisible hand, and where all you felt it could it actually came?
His belief is total, but it's only an experience. It's something, it's difficult to, if you just acknowledge it. And as I will say, I hope Arun will not mind my referring to this example. Dr. Chenna Reddy was the whole and soul during those, the first 6 months. And Arun, as I said, elder brother should not mind what the other says, was the Home Secretary, and I unfortunately was the Home Secretary, not unimportant position. You rubbed the governor on the wrong side. You rubbed the governor on the wrong side. And he used to come with a danda in his hand to the Chief Minister's house. Never before, and I presume never thereafter, does the governor come to the Secretariat. We go to the governor. Okay. In any case, one fine day, Mr. Ramnan was told, I want to see this Home Secretary in the office tomorrow morning, because he was not willing to do something. Unfortunate, stuck to his guns, but not great suffering. That's what I say. All right, ठीक है, आपको इधर से हटा करके कहीं और लगा दिए. नहीं, चल रहा है. I take my own case. I've given 2 examples in the book also. I don't know it. And I can only say, I don't know, Dr. Satish Mathur was his personal physician. And he would tell me, Khanna साहब, ये समझ में नहीं आता. Yes, Governor साहब, सबको तो कहते रहते, तो आपके लिए क्यों नहीं बोलते हैं? He's still very much there. So this is the divine. I don't know. I have no answer. Sudhansh asked me this question. I have no answer. But I have full belief that there has to be something which helps. And it has helped. Even if there are negative cases, you will find that that negative case results somewhere down the line into a positive case. I can't explain it otherwise.
And also mentioned the grace of God.
Grace of God, yes.
Your hard work and your correcting your parents.
Moving on, sir, this is regarding your centenary Founders Day celebrations in Jaipur, and Field Marshal Sam Manekshaw, and you quoted him. Two of his observations still stand out in my memory. One, the attack is the best way of defense. And secondly, how activities in the school taught him to hate the enemy across the valley. Now, this, if I'm able to guess correctly, is aimed at the school of one of your junior colleagues. So could you please throw some light on this?
I will just see Nainital has 2 hills with a lake in between. हाँ, तो इस हिल पे 4 मिशन स्कूल्स हैं, 2 प्रोटेस्टेंट, 2 रोमन कैथलिक. He was in our rival school, Sudhansh, St. Joseph's. I was in Sharma. Okay, we used to have our matches, football, cricket, all matches. Right, we have to beat Sam, and obviously Sam said they have to beat us. Mind you, across the valley there was Birla Vidya Mandir. There's another one sitting here, Naren Sisodia. So you have 3 specimens having been educated, and of course the young lady at the back, Akansha, who is in our time there was no co-education. Siemens also they were co-education, but those were the schools, and that was the school across where Field Marshal said in 1969 that is the school where it was ingrained in him. You have to defeat St. Joseph. That's what he carried into the army. So he said it. And what was the other one that he said? The first one?
Attack is the best.
Attack is the best way. Maybe you see the exterior, what I mentioned about Vinod Pandey, what some people fortunately or unfortunately said about me. You know, that exterior, if it is a rough exterior, that's your attack. To make sure the person doesn't come too close to you. Idiot, I have heard from Vinod Pandey umpteen times.
I am personally grateful, sir, that despite Sam Manekshaw's observations about the enemy across the border, across the valley, you have always been very kind to me personally, sir. So at least on that one, you did not follow Manekshaw to the spirit. Another thing which comes across is the simple living, high thinking, so to say, because he also mentioned it, sir, when he was giving his own views, that when he was growing up in his house in Daryaganj, where they stayed for 48 years, we never possessed a fridge, gas connection, telephone, cooler, radio, etc. because our parents could not afford such luxuries. Mummy used to cook on a kerosene stove. She would keep that dekchi of milk in a bigger container, etc., etc. And how father used to put that khas, which is similar to a cooler. So with that humble background, with that kind of sacrifice which the parents made, and throughout his life, sir, we've noticed that you always maintained a simple lifestyle as compared to an officer in the premier services of the country, even as chief secretary. And then the quote of your mother when she was reciting, "Dekh 10 नौकर मेरे पास," lifting her hands to show her 10 finger. खूब काम करते हैं, मतलब अपने हाथ से ही सब काम करना है. So these things stand out, sir. So would you like to share were the ideals which you followed in life, simple living, high thinking, do they have their origins in this kind of background in what you saw?
They have relevance even today. In fact, this particular phrase, this nauka, I had forgotten. It's my daughter who told me one day, some years ago, कि वो नानी मेरे को नानी हाँ ये बताती थी देश तक. But naturally, my mother used to talk to her. She was till about 14, Sonali's age. My mother was alive. So वो उनको ये nursery rhymes वगैरह, तो that was my mother's idea, that work with your hands. So this नौकर तेरे पास खूब काम करते हैं, ना मांगे पैसा ना something else, and therefore you always try to work with your hand.
ना मांगे खूब काम करते हैं, ना खाना मांगे ना आराम, सब है मेरे तबेदार. moving on, sir. I was personally quite surprised when I read the book that you were the riding champion in the academy and you went on to win the director's equestrian medal. And even otherwise, while in Sherwood in the boarding, you were into hockey, football, cricket, swimming, etc. There's very interesting incident narration as to how the two swimming pools in Sherwood, they came up with kind of shramdan, how the principal gave that challenge to the boys because you were sneaking away into the Raj Bhavan's swimming pool. So sports seem to have played a very important role in your life, sir. And as Mugdha mentioned in the beginning, even as Chief Secretary, you used to probably come for a swim to OTS. So would you like to say something on the role of sports in your development, in your personality?
This is what I feel today when I relate everything to my grandchildren. Fortunately or unfortunately, I'm seeing them growing up. This pandemic has been very bad. Physical activity, I think, is a must. And it was in abundance in the boarding school. Again, times changed. We never discussed sending our daughter to a boarding school. She has never discussed about sending her children to a boarding school. But I think the opportunities you are enabled with are many, many more than ये डे स्कॉलर में ये बैग जो पीठ पे रहता है, कम्यूटिंग जो आप दिल्ली जैसे शहर में करते हो, that virtually kills you. तो 3 चीजों के लिए हमारी पिटाई होती थी स्कूल में, केनिंग होती थी हमारे जमाने में. प्रिंसिपल ओनली वन हुई, एक तो टाउन जाना बिना इजाजत, दूसरा लड़कियों के स्कूल में जाना बिना, और थी अमिताभ ने भी, मैंने भी लिखा है इसमें. That day we did not reach our destination because we were seen and we had to run back. But the important thing was owning up to your responsibility even when you were not identified. I have mentioned this also in the context of the Raj Bhavan swimming pool. We never had a swimming pool. And the governor used to come only once in a while, mostly in summer. Otherwise, pool was there. So we used to go, it was on the same hill. Of course, much closer. I don't know whether the same boys used to go there or not. So we used to, अच्छा golf. तो हम स्विमिंग करने जाते थे. One day the secretariat से राजभवन के किसी ने प्रिंसिपल को फोन कर दिया कि यार आपके स्कूल के बच्चे आ रहे हैं और ये अच्छी बात तो नहीं है. And principal in the old style वो अपने ऑफिस से इंटरकॉम पे, please line up those come to meet me at 3 o'clock after school is over. We knew we are in for getting these, but 90 of us landed up. 90 at 3 o'clock. So Reverend Dwellan, who was the principal, he was also struck. 90 have owned up, they were not identified, nobody knew. And I'm sure 20, 30 were too scared, they never came. So the only thing he confessed afterwards, Reverend Dwellan, he said, I reduced 6 I would have given, I gave you 4 each, because he also had to think about his own hand. But you see, this is how the mind of a good educationist was working. He said, my boys do need swimming pool. तो कैसे बनाए, पैसा तो स्कूल के पास नहीं है. तो he said, खुदाई का काम, डायनामाइटिंग का काम, ये तो स्कूल, मटेरियल कंपोनेंट as we call it in civil service jargon, वो तो स्कूल देगा. मनरेगा तो नहीं था, स्कूल देगा. लेकिन जो मजदूरी का काम है वो लड़के करेंगे. तो हम तगारी लेके 3 बजे बाद जाते थे और जितना भाटे वाटे जो डायनामाइट से निकलते थे वो ले करके खट साइड पे फेंक देते. We were given 1 hour per effort. That was recorded. And I would get, Inderjit Khanna, if I've done 10 man hours, I would get an extra townly. So that was my incentive put into the package. And all the Inderjit Khannas who got the hours put in, it was added, and that was added to the efficiency cup in the school. So my house, if it got the highest marks, would get Little John, 4 houses, so would get the efficiency cup. So the house master and your house captain were chasing you, तुमने ठीक तरह labor नहीं किया और करो. So these are the type of incentives which the principal built in to get, and the schools are functioning even today.
One very interesting incident which has been mentioned, sir, when you were SDO Rai Singh Nagar, And both the collector at that time, Mr. Pandey, and the SP, Mr. Rajen Shekhar, both had so much affection for you that both wanted you to stay with them whenever. Thank you, ma'am, for your time. And you did a very fine balancing act, and you've written that my rather judicious and practical decision was to alternate my stay at Sri Ganganagar between the collector's residence and the SP's residence. So those were the times when actually the officers, younger officers, would be hosted by the seniors in the district. So unfortunately, I think those days are now past and such things don't happen. But would you like to mention, sir, what were these experiences when relationships used to be so personal despite being in official positions?
Shekhar Saab was the SP and Harish Pandey was the collector. I was not from Rajasthan, 2 साल तो सर्विस हुई थी, कोटा से मुझे भेज दिया राय सिंह नगर. चलो. Morning I reached and I went to the irrigation dark bungalow, got ready, went to the collector's office. So in the course of conversation, he asked me, "Kahan reh rahe ho?" I said, "Irrigation dark bungalow." So he called his PA or PN and said, "Saab ka saman collect karke ghar le jao." So that's where I started staying at the collector's house whenever I visited. It was an order. Immediately after the collector, the same day I went to call on the SP. Right? As a professional, you have to call on the SP. As my luck or whatever my fortunate position would have it, Shekhar Saab and my brother had studied together in college. And not only studied, same subject, dear friends. So both of them, husband and wife, looked at me, "Acha, Singh Nagar aa gaye? Yahan rahe ho, kahan reh rahe ho, saman lao." Maine kaha, "वो collector साहब ने मुझे कह दिया." After that, it was one weekend here and one weekend. But that was the love and affection that we got in our time. As I said, मुझे भी याद नहीं है कि हम ये दे पाए love and affection. But since we got it, I can't but help acknowledge.
It's already been mentioned that your PTI in Sherwood, he nicknamed you Titch. That name stayed from Sherwood, continued into Stephens, continued into the service, and so many people would have been aware of it, sir, but for us, the junior colleagues, we were not aware of it. Now, there must be very few people now left who must still be calling you Titch. We would like to know, sir, how many of those are still there and how you've lived with this nickname right through the school days, since the school.
As I mentioned in the book, first my music teacher, I used to play my music teacher, my father was very insistent that I learn the piano because he had tried with my sister, failed, tried with my brother, failed. So he thought this chap, he must, I learned it 6 years, never mind. So he started calling me Isaac. I don't know why. But within 1 year, the PT teacher, because I used to do gymnastics, boxing and all these wonderful things, Fordham, big, huge man. And I was rather big in size. So he used to call me Titch. That's where the name started and stuck. After that, in our class of 29, we were, 7 of us came to Delhi. 5 in St. Stephen, Amitabh in Kirodimal, and another one in the Delhi Polytechnic. Delhi, 12 years after independence, did not have an engineering college mind. So 7 of us used to meet. So the name Titch continued in St. Stephen's College. St. Stephen's happens to be the sort of say the place from which a lot of civil servants come. When we reached the academy, 2025, St. Stephen's. So the name continued in the service. Even today, my batchmates still call me by that name. I have no problem. And as my luck or bad luck would have it, when I requested him to write a forward and he very sweetly agreed, I could not restrain his hand. So that's what he calls me and he has started by that. I cannot help it. I have no problems with that.
We also got to know, sir, that the naming of this beautiful Central Park in Jaipur, it was your suggestion. And In the entire book, all the politicians you have mentioned, Bhairav Singh ji, Dr. Manmohan Singh, Dr. M. Chenna Reddy, Shri Ashok Gehlot, all those who've been mentioned, you have praise for all of them. So even though not mentioned in the book, sir, did you ever have any, and you also lavished a lot of praise on Dr. Barkatullah Khan, Shri Haridev Joshi ji, Sukhadia ji, I mean, all these stalwarts. So going beyond what has been mentioned in the book, was there ever any difficult time with a minister or a politician?
There were with ministers. There were with ministers. I mentioned one in Delhi, the enforcement directorate. There was only one minister I mentioned. There's another minister. There were incidents. It's not that there were not. But as I said, Barkatullah Khan, no, he later became chief minister, but I'll relate the incident which Arun has related to me. So that makes it much more authentic. Arun was SDO Mount Abu. Okay, newly married Mount Abu. Barkatullah Khan Sahab was the minister for local self-government. There was some meeting they had, Mount Abu is a state level meeting. Local bodies people had come. So Arun could not go for the evening dinner or the event. Next morning he was on his round for his walk. When he returned, his PN came to him running and said, "Sir, एक साहब आए थे अपनी Fiat चला रहे थे और आपके लिए एक कार्ड छोड़ के गए, कहते साहब SDO साहब जब आ जाए उनको देना." Please note, साहब आए थे अपनी Fiat कार चला रहे थे और ये कार्ड दे के गए. Arun read the card. Barkatullah Khan, Minister for Local Government. Now, those were ministers. Arun went to the circuit house, apologized, and he said, "No, I only came to apologize because you had not come and I thought maybe the invitations have not been given to you properly." These were ministers that we had.
I came to apologize because you were not invited.
Not invited. अब ये देखिए, this is the बड़ापन. It's not that only I have encountered, na? So don't sort of get a feeling that he's sitting right here. So these are the type of people we have. We have had difficulties. I have had a minister shout at me at one case. I have mentioned that in the book. Bhairav Singh ji gave certain instructions. I could carry out only 2 out of 3. Third one I could not carry out. I conveyed to him. I conveyed to the chief secretary. Minister was cross. He shouted at me many things. But by God's grace, the chief minister said nothing, came back and matters were resolved. It's mentioned the details.
जो मेरा भी बहुत सारे जितने आपने नाम दिए सबसे करीब करीब साल काम किया, मगर बहुत बड़ी बात उस समय ये थी कि मिनिस्टर सुनने को तैयार थे, सारे चीफ मिनिस्टर सुनने को तैयार थे, आपको पूरा टाइम देते थे, एक्सेसिबिलिटी थी, बिल्कुल कभी भी आप चले जाइए और उनको अपनी बात बताइए. तो जो अगर वो कुछ ऐसा काम जो आप समझते नहीं कर सकते थे करने के लिए कहते थे, तो आधे से ज्यादा दफा तो वो लोग समझ जाते थे कि हाँ भाई मैं जो अफसर कह रहा है वो सही है और नहीं करना चाहिए, या करना है अगर वो कोई और तरीके से कर दें जो गलत नहीं है. वो सुनने को तैयार थे. अब आज मैं नहीं जानता कितना मिनिस्टर चीफ मिनिस्टर सुनने को तैयार हैं और कितना अफसर बोलने को तैयार है. इट इज बोथ वेज. अगर आपको ज्यादा डांट पड़ेगी तो आप बोलना बंद कर देंगे.
मैं मेरे मुंह से कहूंगा तो अच्छा नहीं लगेगा. एक बार इन्होंने मुझे किस तरह से एक आफत में से निकाला वो सर, आई थिंक देयर हैज बीन मेनी इयर्स नाउ.
मैं तो देखिए होम सेक्रेटरी था और ये इलेक्शन होने वाले थे, शायद 95 इसके लोकसभा के होने वाले थे, तो वो बजरंग दल और ये लोग कुछ अपना लिटरेचर बांट रहे थे इसमें कि ये गौ रक्षा, ये दुनिया भर का रितंबरा वगैरह. तो एडिशनल डायरेक्टर ये सॉरी आप उसमें थे डीजी इंटेलिजेंस, इन्होंने एक नोट भेजा और उसमें लिखा कि साहब ये लोग जो है ये सब जो सो कॉल्ड बीजेपी के सब जो भी आप कह लीजिए वो लोग पार्ट थे, इस तरह की एक्टिविटीज कर रहे हैं, और ये जो है लॉ एंड ऑर्डर खराब करेगा, माहौल बिगाड़ेगा और इलेक्शन में ठीक नहीं है। आपका ये नोट था, मैंने उसको एग्जामिन किया। मैंने कहा कि भाई ये जो कर रहे हैं ये लोग, जो बांट रहे हैं, लिटरेचर बांट रहे हैं, उसमें जो बातें कर रहे हैं, इज एनी ऑफेंस मेड आउट? आई मेड अ रेफरेंस टू द लॉ डिपार्टमेंट। अगर कोई ऑफेंस है तो एक्शन लिया जाए। लॉ डिपार्टमेंट ने, लॉ सेक्रेटरी साहब ने उसको भेज दिया एडवोकेट जनरल साहब को, और एडवोकेट जनरल तो जैसे आप जानते हैं वो पार्टी के ही होते थे, तो उन्होंने क्या लिख दिया, कोई ऑफेंस इसमें नहीं बनता है। मगर उन्होंने ये भी लिख दिया कि ये जो अफसर ने इस तरह के नोट बना के भेजा है, ये पार्टी पॉलिटिक्स में इंडल्ज कर रहे हैं, इनको नहीं करना चाहिए। ऐसा नोट उन्होंने लिख दिया। मैंने खैर ध्यान नहीं दिया। मैंने होम मिनिस्टर और मुख्यमंत्री जी को बात भेज दिया। मुख्यमंत्री जी ने उसको भेज दिया, भावड़ा जी उस समय डिप्टी सीएम थे, उन्होंने उस पर लिख दिया कि ये जो एडवोकेट जनरल ने कहा है कि सबसे ने ऐसा नोट भेजा है, इनके खिलाफ डिपार्टमेंट एक्शन लेना चाहिए, कार्रवाई शुरू करनी चाहिए। और वो उन्होंने मुख्यमंत्री जी को भेज दिया, क्योंकि उन्होंने, मुख्यमंत्री जी ने उनको भेजा, उन्होंने उसको एग्री करके भेज दिया। जब मेरे पास आया, मैंने कहा भाई ये क्या हो गया इसमें, तो मैंने फिर उसमें एक वापस नोट लिखा। उसको रूटीन नोट बोलते हैं। पता नहीं आज कितने लोग जानते हैं व्हाट इज रूटीन नोट। अगर किसी रूटीन नोट नहीं, दैट इज नॉट रूटीन नोट। रूटीन नोट होता है, मेन नोट पे नहीं लिखी जाती, वो डिफरेंट, और वो कभी सीनियर ऑफिसर के नोट के ऊपर नहीं लिखा जाता, वो उसको, खैर वो मैंने रूटीन नोट लिखा है, अपने होम मिनिस्टर को भेजा। उन्होंने कहा ये तुमने क्या लिख दिया? मैंने कहा साहब ये गलत है, तो चीफ मिनिस्टर साहब ने अप्रूव कर दिया, वो सही नहीं है। बोले नहीं मैं नहीं जानता, वही तुम्हें लेके जाना। मैंने कहा आप तो भेज दीजिए फाइन। उन्होंने, भरोसे सिंह जी थे, उन्होंने उनको भेज दी। उन्होंने उस पर लिख दिया, होम मिनिस्टर एंड होम सेक्रेटरी प्लीज डिस्कस। हम दोनों गए। मैंने कहा सर ये क्या लिख दिया आपने, इनके खिलाफ एडिशनल, ये हमारे डीजी इंटेलिजेंस के खिलाफ इंक्वायरी के लिए लिख दिया। बोले अरे भाई ये तो गलत हो गया। मैंने कहा आप सही करिए इसको। तो उन्होंने कहा देखिए ये अंडरस्टैंडिंग थी बिटवीन द चीफ मिनिस्टर। उन्होंने कहा ठीक, तुम भी मेरी तरफ से नोट बना के ले आओ। और जो उन्होंने पहले नोट लिखा था कि एक्शन लेना चाहिए, उसको उन्होंने रिवर्स करते हुए और करे नथिंग, नो एक्शन इज रिक्वायर्ड। तो ये मतलब मैं खाली इसलिए नरेट कर रहा हूँ कि लोग सुनने को तैयार थे और हम बोलने को तैयार। एक छोटी घटना, क्योंकि अभी ये बात आ ही गई है, तो मैं आपको और बता दूं। हरदेव जोशी जी आज नहीं है बेचारे। मैं RFC में था मैनेजिंग डायरेक्टर। तो एक दिन उनका फोन आया और कहने लगे ये पुखराज कालानी जी हैं, ये आपसे मिलेंगे। उन्होंने ठीक है साहब। चीफ मिनिस्टर खुद कभी फोन करते नहीं थे, बहुत रेयरली बात करते थे। खैर उन्होंने भेज दीजिए। पुखराज कालानी जी आ गए। उन्होंने कहा कि साहब ये एक केस है, 30 लाख का लोन के लिए इन्होंने अप्लाई किया है। मैंने कहा भाई मैं देख लूंगा, अच्छा तो याद नहीं रहता है। मैं चले गए, मैंने वो फाइल मंगाई। तो उसमें ये चल रहा था कि इस शख्स ने बॉम्बे में भी लोन लिया और लोन लेके इंडस्ट्री नहीं लगाई और पैसे खा के भाग गया। तो यही काम करता है, इसको लोन नहीं देना चाहिए। इसके बाद मैंने कहा भाई इसको एक्सपेडाइट करो। उसमें 1-2 महीना निकल गया वो करस्पॉन्डेंस में। फिर एक दिन फोन आ गया। इस बीच में कुछ और कंप्लेंट्स आ गई। फिर सीएम साहब खुद बोले, कहने लगे भाई वो क्या हुआ उस मैटर में। मैंने कहा साहब मैं आपको पर्सनली आके एक्सप्लेन करूँगा। उन्होंने कहा आ जाइए, अभी आ जाइए। मैं गया तो पता नहीं आजकल क्या, वो बड़ा कमरा सा ड्राइंग रूम था, उसमें बैठे रहते थे। तो उसमें बहुत सारे और भी लोग बैठे थे। मैंने कहा साहब फ्री हो जाएं तो बताता हूँ। बोले नहीं, अच्छा वो समझ गए, आज इस कमरे में आइए। वो पास में एक डाइनिंग रूम का छोटा कमरा था, उसमें चले गए। कहने क्या हुआ? मैंने कहा साहब उसमें ये शिकायतें आई थी कि ये पैसा ले लेता है और इंडस्ट्री लगाता नहीं है। और इस बीच में हम लोग कर रहे थे तो उसमें एक शिकायत ये और आ गई कि पोखराज कालानी जी ने आपके नाम से 60,000 रुपए लिए। मैंने उनको हृदय जोशी जी के मुंह पे ये कहा कि साहब आपने 60,000 रुपए लिए। वो मुस्कुराए, मैंने अच्छा जाइए, खत्म हो गई। मैंने कहा तो कल ट्रांसफर हो जाएगा मेरा, मगर मैंने पूरे 3 साल का टेन्योर वहाँ। ये मतलब मैं चीफ मिनिस्टर को क्रेडिट दे रहा हूँ कि वो सुनने को तैयार थे। ये बात कि आपने पैसे खाए हैं इतना से बस मुस्कुरा के कह दिया चले जाइए।
पूछने को तो बहुत कुछ है, many things, but I will just ask the final 2 questions, sir. तो सर आपने अरुण कुमार जी के साथ ये एसोसिएशन you mentioned about कोटा बीकानेर where you again started riding both of you, और as luck would have it, sir, you succeeded him as the Chief Secretary of the state. So it must have been a very special moment for you succeeding Mr. Arun Kumar, who's like an elder brother and so close, and you shared a bond over 30 years till that point of time. उस बारे में सर कुछ बताना चाहेंगे, how you felt when you had to succeed somebody so close to you?
Very, See, I was in Delhi. I was, of course, enforcement director, not a very desirable post to be, but since I had been put there, and so in any case, CM asked me. I said, sir, I cannot go because while ultimately I will settle in Jaipur, my daughter has just joined her MBA. She has no place to stay. हम लोग वहाँ जाएंगे. एक दो बार फोन किया, दिल्ली में मुझे बुलाया. Then my awkwardness was that Arun was the chief secretary. Then he spoke. I mentioned, I think, all this. He spoke to Arun and said that you will be going as the chairman of the regulatory authority. Then I spoke to Arun, and Arun said, yes, I have been told, and I have told the CM that there will be no problem if you are brought here. And I remember the words which Chief Minister used at that time, कि भाई public service में आपको कुछ मेरे लिए कि sacrifice to. In other words, I have to leave my family behind. It come, which I left them for 6 months because then in the meantime alternative accommodation for Sonali was thought, and then my wife could come here. Now, moving into Arun's shoes, no difficult task because there were no problems as such. That Arun left for me that you are big in nature that I have to, get over. Things moved very smoothly, except for the strike which was there, would have been there even if he continued. The elections would have been there even if he continued. So it was nothing in turmoil which was left for me. It was a fairly smooth sailing, which one chief secretary did, the next one was doing. And therefore, I think there was no real problem in the making.
Thinking in terms of the emotional aspect of.
I don't think it made any difference because I remember I went for his swearing in the next day with Chief Justice. उन्होंने आपकी swearing in भी कराई थी ना in the post उसमें regulatory commission. There was no difficulty at all.
It is also a coincidence that Mr. M.L. Mehta, who preceded Sir as the Chief Secretary, and then Shri Inderjit Khanna ji, who succeeded Sir. I think over the last 30 years, there are 2 Chief Secretaries who had the longest tenures. Sir was there for about 3 years, and Mehta Sahab was there for about 3 years, 10 months or so. After that, none of the Chief Secretaries have had a tenure of 3 years or more. But now coming to the last question, sir, though we could go on and on, but only one place in the book I could notice some sense of regret when you mentioned that in hindsight, you should not have perhaps accepted the Mathur Commission. So I would like to ask whether now in retrospect, you feel you could have done some assignments differently, or you could have lived your professional life in a different, slightly different way, or do you feel, are there any regrets at all about the way you lived your professional life? Or so now at this stage, do you think about it, or are there any thoughts which come to you on this?
Was a little anecdote about 3 chief secretaries. Interesting, because we are also good friends. Anil is not with us. Bhairu Singh Ji is passing away, and his cremation. It's an anecdote which I want to relate. All 3 of us, Amel had a driver, I didn't have, Arun didn't have at that point of time. So Amel's car and 3 of us sitting, we went, udhar ke Shastri Nagar mein tha. We got out of the car and there were barricades. So we went, and in order of seniority, Amel went first. Barricade ke beech mein se, any mumbled chief secretary or former chief, Mukhya Sachiv. Then Arun went, Mukhya Sachiv. Then my turn. I also mumbled Mukhya Sachiv, poor Mukhya. So the constable, he says, एक के बाद एक ये सभी chief secretary बनते जा रहे हैं. But that was the reality. What could we do? Now, what was the real question that you had? Mathur Commission. Yeah. You see, I'm ignorant as regards politics. I don't know too much of politics. I unfortunately never delved in that. This was a political issue, which I realized later. When CM asked me, I thought it's all right, I will do it. But in retrospect, and I have acknowledged in the book that maybe I made a mistake. This should not have been taken up by me or even any civil servant, and best left to the judiciary to look into this issue and decide. That's what I feel now in retrospect. गलती मेरी थी कि I accept it. Maybe I should. ये political matters में हमको नहीं involve होना चाहिए.
Anything which you feel, sir, you could have done differently, or throughout the career or the many assignments which you had?
See, I enjoyed rural development a lot also. Mind you, many of my batchmates used to tell me, कि यार तुम थक नहीं गए, एक ही डेस्क पे IRDP पे काम करते जा रहे हो. मैंने कहा मैं तो थका नहीं, क्योंकि I enjoy going around the states, go to the people, you talk to them. कभी अरुणाचल जा रहे हैं, कभी केरला जा रहे हैं, कभी कहीं जा रहे हैं. I used to enjoy it. So somehow I never got bored. Though I was 6 years on the same desk, of course, a little more task on this Panchayati Raj. Somehow I never got bored in any of my assignments. I don't know what was the reason. As I said, at some places I used to make certain conscious decisions as a director of education. People didn't like to go there. I know it. So many of us sitting here, because Bikaner is in the back of beyond. And the state is Banswara ek taraf aur Jhalawad दूसरी तरफ, Bana ek taraf, Dholpur दूर. But you have to visit. Of course, we were only 2. We didn't have any children at that time. Yasmin was very accommodating. The ladies club in Bikaner, as again Arun will bear me out, was very active. So she was fully involved there and occasionally would accompany me on tour also. But I also decided that each year, these were such conscious decisions taken when I acknowledged that the strain was there. And I also acknowledged that maybe I was not giving enough time to my family, which were only 2 of us. छुट्टी तो लेनी है 2 बार. एक तो शॉर्टली, कैजुअली, कभी दिल्ली भाग जाओ पेरेंट्स के पास, या मेरी बहन के पास बॉम्बे चले जाओ, और ब्रदर के पास चले जाओ, पर उस कैजुअली. और एक बार साल में पूरे 1 महीने की छुट्टी लेनी है, मोस्टली टू माय ब्रदर इन द आर्मी, कभी अरुणाचल, कभी डलहौजी, कभी फलानी जगह. And give the credit to the minister, because the first time I was going on the short leave in October, Khet Singh ji sitting with me in a meeting was writing things. I wondered, itne notes education minister le raha hai, kya note le raha hai? We came out of the room. He told me, Khanna sahab, aap transfer चाहते हो? मैंने कहा नहीं, आप छुट्टी चाह रहे हो? मैंने कहा सर थक गया हूँ, अब जाऊंगा छुट्टी. अच्छा ये ले लो. All transfer list. He was taking no notes of the meeting. He was just noting down these teachers are to be transferred. But that was, and they were very encouraging in my boss at every stage, Satyakasant Singh ji, I remember when I had to go, I told him, I said, sir, मैं NIRD जाऊंगा training. 1 महीने की training, first तो collector ने permission दे दी, Harish Pandey. He said, जाओ. And I confessed, I said, मैं तो South India के 2 स्टेट अपने भारत दर्शन में नहीं देखे, मैं देखना चाहता हूँ. He said, जाओ 4 हफ्ते के लिए. रास्ते में बैचमेट मिल गया कावड़े, मैं भी जा रहा हूँ. मैंने कहा चलो. तो हम दोनों थे वहां पे. तो all things happened. And then I had to get permission from the development commissioner. As an SDO, kaha development commissioner? Yeah. Khanna, why do you want to go? I said, sir, the fact is that I haven't seen the states of Kerala and Tamil Nadu in my Bharat Darshan. Collector ने छुट्टी दे दी. मैंने हाँ दे तो दिया उन्होंने. एक हफ्ता ये, 1 महीना ये और 15 दिन और. But these were the indulgent courses that we had. हाँ स्कूटर पे गए बिल्कुल. From Tamil, no, it's written in the book. I didn't know. From Madras, my uncle who was in the Air Force gave me 2-wheeler. तो कावड़े पीछे, वो चलाता नहीं था, मैं आगे, और हम वो जो होता था पहिया स्टेपनी, उसके ऊपर हमारे बैग्स. We went वहां से मदुराई, पुडुचेरी, केप कॉमरन, त्रिवेंद्रम, पता नहीं कहाँ गए. It was, but I was driving, and Kodaikanal also on the way. But those days I don't think we can repeat them. In fact, scooter chalana, I'll relate an incident. Yasmin used to make fun of me. I think it was a little before we got married, because I was SDM as mayor and I met her and she was there. So it was 4 months before we got married. I had a 2-wheeler and I was teaching her how to drive. She could drive a cycle, but not a scooter. On Lohagal Road, those who are familiar with that mayor, so I was on the back seat and she was driving. वो भैंस आ गई सामने. तो मैं उसको कहूँ ब्रेक दबाओ, वो एक्सेलरेटर दबा दिया, तो मैं तो पीछे कूद गया. Scooter went and hit the Mufti, and of course she fell down. By God grace, she didn't get hurt, but she always did that. She said, "You deserted me at a time when you should have seen." But I just jumped, and my daughter, of course, also holds it against me.
Thank you, sir. Another thing which stands out in the book is the amount of research, the notes, the diaries which you maintained. The dates are all perfect. The meticulousness which has gone into everything. Even the postcard written by your St. Stephen's maths teacher 60 years back, 1962.
11th February 1962.
That postcard is also there. So, sir, it's a great lesson for everyone as to how one needs to document various aspects of one's life. So there are too many things to still ask, but I think in the interest of the time of all the, so we would.
I'll just respond to that teacher since he has mentioned. It's in the book, but still, Ranjit Bhatia was the teacher. All those who are from St. Stephen's would have known him. Maths ka teacher tha mera. Ranjit was a young man, had gone to Oxford as a Rhodes Scholar, came back, represented India in the 800 meters in Rome Olympics, didn't win a medal, but represented India. He used to teach us. Obviously in class, and I was in final year at that time, BSc. So him, I must have asked a question. Young people are teacher ko nahi pata hoga jawab. He could not answer. 11th February, he was in Jabalpur. Postcard. 11th February. And he writes to Satish Mathur, another teacher of mine. Dear Satish, Inderjit had asked a question. I didn't know the answer. Now this is my teacher. Maybe some weeks or months down the line, sitting in a playing field in Jabalpur, still thinking ke question I need resolve kar paye. And said, iska solution here. That postcard with all the equations, left, right, this square root, that square root, is still with me. Now that is the type of teacher whom we had, and I would only hope that little children today should also have those type of teachers. इनका स्टूडेंट थे, इनके टाइम में हमसे बोलता नहीं, तो हमारी I remember always on teachers in St. were always on the playing field after the class. Whether playing or not playing, they enjoyed being on both sides of the field.
Thank you so much, sir, for writing the book in such an interesting manner. And thank you to Pant, sir, for holding this discussion and revealing interesting snippets from the book. Moving on, if time permits, I know we've exceeded our time, but maybe, sir, you would like to take a few questions from the audience. Maybe we can keep it brief, but if there's somebody who would like to ask, or we could do it over tea, because we have high tea after this session. So maybe we could have a more engaging discussion. But allow me to thank all of you for your time here today. And for a formal vote of thanks, I now have the honor of inviting Shri N.S. Sisodia ji to kindly.
Well, I won't come there because a lot of time. Is it working? It's it's late in the day, and there've been many wonderful speeches. So I don't want to impose myself on you. In fact, I feel like a husband who's just been married for the 9th time and has the challenge to keep the wife entertained somehow. So I don't think I will venture into this. But nevertheless, let me thank Mrs. Usha Sharma, our Chief Secretary, who unfortunately had to go. But it is quite remarkable, despite her many engagements and commitments, she was able to come and grace this function. Shows her commitment to the task of continuing learning, lifelong learning. She gives importance to it. And that's very encouraging for every one of us. I must also thank the audience for being so wonderful, being so patient. In fact, Jigyasa and perhaps IAS Literary Associations also exist because of you. It is for you, and your support really helps us in trying to pursue its activities. So thank you very much for all that. I thank Mr. Arun Kumar for giving us his support, his guidance. In fact, he's been the founder of Jigyasa, and it's because of him that we are able to continue with these activities. I thank Mr. Inderjit Khanna for having authored this book. It is an example of great deal of dedication, and now you can utilize even a most difficult and challenging time like the corona pandemic. He utilized that time and wrote out this book. In fact, he should be counted as a role model among civil servants. He should be, there are so many values that we can emulate, younger people can emulate. His rectitude, his commitment to work, his dedication to causes, his commitment to underprivileged and poor people, his amiable nature. Sometimes I wondered why he's never faced any difficulty with all kinds of politicians. And I think there are 2 or 3 reasons for it. One is that he's transparently honest. He's thorough and competent in his work. And even though the politicians may have differed with him, they must have found very little reason to be vindictive. And that is something that we can also learn. I thank Dr. Venkateshwaran, who's very generously offered this wonderful facility, and Sudhansh, who has thoroughly read this book and raised many pertinent questions. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time to discuss more thoroughly, but perhaps on some other occasion. I'd also like to thank Mugdha ji, who has so ably run the IAS Literary Society. And frankly, I must confess that we didn't do any work. She was doing all the hard work. We are here just to thank you all. I think finally, I'd also like to thank all of you, all of us retired and those who are serving, for making Rajasthan cadre such a wonderful cadre. It's a cadre in which there is such a lot of affection, understanding, desire to help. The superiors have performed a wonderful role. I could narrate many instances in which one has been protected, saved, from the wrath of politicians, and also perhaps for having wonderful politicians. So this is a great cadre, and let us hope that we will try and maintain the great traditions of this cadre. Thank you very much.
I thank everyone and request everyone for high tea in the room next door. Also want to make a small announcement. I see some copies of Sir's books are available here. So in case anybody who has not had the pleasure of reading it after this discussion, I'm sure you would like to. And if I may request Sir to autograph them for people who are buying it from this session today, it will be nice, no, to have an autographed copy.